Hi everyone. This is a translated audio of a story I love, but it is not my original work. All credits go to the amazing original author. I do not own the story, characters, or plot. If you enjoy it, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The hall had been quiet, but at those words, people started moving. Xueya felt momentarily confused until he was pushed in front of a screen, his hands tied to the carved railing above. It dawned on him then that the whip was meant for him. Before he could beg for mercy, a piece of white cloth was stuffed into his mouth, leaving him to make muffled sounds. The crown prince took the long whip from a jade tray, his cold eyes sweeping over Xueya, and raised his hand for the first strike. Although Xueya was from a brothel, the madam had always been careful with his skin, never allowing severe punishment. Now, he truly felt what pain was. After just one whip, he was in tears. By the third, he felt like half his soul had left his body, and by the seventh, he could barely move, close to passing out. The crown prince was adept with the whip, aiming at the body without hitting the face. Thus, Xueya's clothes were in tatters, but his face remained intact. Just as the ninth whip was about to fall, someone rushed in from outside. Your Highness, Lord Empress has sent something over. The crown prince paused, a trace of pleasure flashing in his eyes. He tossed the bloody whip to a servant and asked, "What is it?" "Red bean pastry and jade cups. Lord Empress just had some and thought it was delicious, so he sent some to the Eastern Palace for your Highness to try," the person replied. The crown prince smiled. "Godfather knows I love sweets." With that, he glanced at the still-bound Xueya. Xueya's head was lowered, his clothes bloodied, appearing unconscious. "Send him to be castrated," the crown prince ordered, wiping his hands with a cloth handed by a servant. But as he turned to leave, he stopped. "Wait." He looked back at Xueya and walked over. "Lift his face." A servant immediately complied. Xueya was forced to look up, his small face tear-streaked and eyes filled with tears. When he saw the crown prince, his pupils contracted, and more tears flowed as if begging for mercy. Unmoved, the crown prince's gaze shifted downward. "Clothes." A servant stepped forward to strip Xueya naked. The clothes, soaked in blood, stuck to his wounds, causing him to nearly faint from the pain. The crown prince glanced over, then suddenly smiled. "With this being so small, whether he's castrated or not makes no difference. Forget it." With that, he turned and left. Xueya laid on a hard bed for half a month, with someone coming daily to change his dressings. It wasn't until the 18th day that he could barely walk. As soon as he could get out of bed, he was brought before the crown prince. No, he could no longer call him the crown prince. The other had now become the new emperor. 18 days ago, Xueya had thought the crown prince was a kind person. Now he knew how dark his heart was, and he couldn't help but tremble when kneeling before him. Xueya, newly crowned, had a pile of matters to deal with. Only today did he have a free moment and learned from a servant that Xueya could get out of bed, so he had him brought over. At this moment, Xueya coldly scrutinized Xueya, noting that he seemed even thinner than a few days ago, like a little lamb. Kneeling on the ground, exposing a delicate white neck, it seemed like it could be snapped with a single hand. Xueya seemed to sense the gaze on him and shivered again, burying his head even deeper, wishing he could make himself invisible. He had once thought immense wealth was within his grasp, but now he realized that only death awaited him. "Are you afraid of me?" Xueya asked ambiguously. Xueya paused, then quickly shook his head. "If you're not afraid, then lift your head," Xueya continued. Trembling all over, Xueya had no choice but to raise his head. As he saw that cold, handsome face, his eyes filled with tears. Xueya saw the tears and smiled faintly. "Why are you crying? I haven't hit you today. Do you cry this easily because the late emperor often punished you?" Xueya tried to hold back his tears, but he was so scared of the person in front of him that he couldn't stop them. He could only shake his head. "All right, stop crying. Your crying annoys me," Xueya said impatiently. This made Xueya immediately stop crying, though tears still hung on his cheeks. He wanted to wipe them away but didn't dare. Noticing Xueya's sudden cessation of crying, Xueya raised an eyebrow, seemingly amused. He leaned forward, wiping away the tears on Xueya's cheek with his finger. "I've just ascended the throne and issued a general amnesty. How about I pardon your death sentence too?" Xueya was stunned for a moment, then quickly nodded. "Your death sentence is lifted, and you've already suffered for your offenses. From now on, you'll serve in my palace, all right." A hint of struggle flashed in Xueya's eyes, but the hope for fortune sprouted again in his heart. He bit his lip and showed a cautious smile. "Is that possible?" Xueya smiled too. "Of course, it's possible." He then turned to the chief eunuch beside him. "Give him eunuch's clothes and let him serve by my side from now on." The chief eunuch acknowledged the order and had Xueya taken away to change. The eunuch's clothes were unattractive, dark green, but Xueya was naturally beautiful. Though he had lost weight over the past few days, He still looked good, even in the unattractive green robe, outshining others around him. Even those serving closely to Xueya were chosen for their good looks. After changing into the eunuch's attire, Xueya was terrified that he would be castrated. He spent several days in constant fear, but when no one came to do it, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Once he was relieved, he couldn't help but wonder when he would get the chance to serve the new emperor directly. Since seeing Xueya a few days earlier, Xueya had been assigned to menial tasks like sweeping. Every day, before dawn, he had to get up and make sure there wasn't a single fallen leaf on the ground. If any were found, he wouldn't get to eat. Missing a few meals made Xueya's face even thinner. He didn't want to stay and sweep forever. If he had to keep doing menial work, he might as well find a way out of the palace and make a living elsewhere. However, the area he swept was far from the emperor's residence, and he would have to pass through 3 major checkpoints to get there. The cold, armed guards were the first checkpoint. Seeing the guards made him too scared to approach, so he continued sweeping. After several days, he was utterly exhausted. One early morning, before the inspector eunuch arrived, he abandoned his broom and dozed off against the wall. Above him was an osmanthus tree, and as the wind blew, osmanthus flowers fell all over Xueya. He fell asleep drowsily until someone kicked him awake. "So, you're slacking off here." Xueya's voice was lazy. Seeing Xueya standing before him, Xueya felt both fear and surprise. He quickly knelt and performed the salute he had just learned. However, he hadn't practiced much, so it wasn't perfect, and his hat fell off, causing Xueya to chuckle. After laughing at Xueya, Xueya glanced at the osmanthus tree beside them. He had planted this tree in his childhood and even climbed it. This morning, he suddenly wanted to see it, so he dismissed his attendants and came alone, only to find a lazy, napping, cat. With his busy schedule, Xueya had almost forgotten Xueya's existence. Seeing him napping in the morning light, his delicate face seemingly glowing, he couldn't resist kicking him awake. Xueya hurriedly picked up his hat and put it back on, then heard Xueya's voice. "What work are you doing now?" "Sweeping," Xueya replied. Xueya pondered for a moment. "No more sweeping. From now on, you will serve me closely." Xueya was overjoyed to hear this. He couldn't help but look up, smiling as he had been taught in the brothel, with eyes wide open and eyebrows arched. After smiling, he remembered he was facing the emperor, not a customer, and quickly lowered his head. "This servant obeys your command." Xueya saw Xueya's smile and smirked before turning away. Xueya could now serve Xueya closely, but in reality, he had no duties. There were too many attendants around Xueya, and he wasn't needed. Although he was supposed to serve closely, he didn't even get the chance to carry water. Moreover, Xueya felt that the other palace servants seemed to ostracize him. After thinking it over, he realized they must be jealous of his intact body. Despite this, he knew he had to curry favor. Having grown up in a brothel, Xueya was skilled at adapting to different people. The first person he targeted was Xueya, the adopted son of the chief eunuch serving Xueya. Xueya was a few years older than Xueya, efficient in his work but a habitual gambler. Unfortunately, his gambling skills were poor, and he often lost everything. One day, after losing again and feeling frustrated, Xueya secretly followed him. The next day, Xueya took the 2 copper coins Xueya had given him to the gambling table, and by the end of the session, the 2 coins had turned into 100. Xueya's attitude toward Xueya changed dramatically. After that, Xueya began to stand by Xueya's side, helping him gamble. Xueya had never won so smoothly before. In a good mood, he was willing to speak well of Xueya in front of his godfather. On the 3rd day, Xueya received the task of bringing the wash basin for Xueya. That day, Xueya got up early and applied some osmanthus oil he had secretly collected to his wrists and behind his ears, hoping to make an impression on Xueya. But reality disappointed him. A military report from the border arrived urgently. Xueya didn't even glance at him, quickly washing up and rushing to the court. Xueya had only promised to help him get one opportunity to serve in front of the emperor. The next day, someone else was doing the task of bringing the wash basin again, which made Xueya so angry he cried, thinking he might as well leave the palace. But leaving the palace was impossible. Xueya had no choice but to keep pestering Xueya, who eventually got annoyed and sent him to deliver items. Go deliver things to a few of the consorts. The late emperor had several consorts in addition to He Xulan, the male empress. Although Xueya was not their biological son, he didn't treat them poorly and sometimes sent people to deliver items to them. As for He Xulan, Xueya always delivered items personally. Listlessly following others to deliver items, Xueya had to cross the imperial garden. Halfway through, everyone in front of him knelt down. This servant greets the Empress Dowager. Long live the Empress Dowager. With the new emperor's ascension, He Xulan had risen from Lord Empress to Empress Dowager. Xueya, walking at the end of the line, was preoccupied with thoughts of how to get Xuelingjing to notice him. So, when others knelt down, he was still standing, even raising his head foolishly upon hearing, Empress Dowager. Raising his head, he locked eyes with another pair of eyes. Those eyes were as dark as ink, beautiful but with an inherent sharpness of a ruler. Meeting those eyes, Xueya suddenly realized he was being foolish and quickly knelt down, too nervous even to greet properly, curling up silently on the ground. His hat inadvertently rolled off again, this time rolling even farther than when he met Xuelingjing. Xueya glanced at the hat rolling far away, bit his lip, wanting to retrieve it but fearing more attention. He was more afraid of He Xulan than Xuelingjing, even though He Xulan had neither hit nor scolded him. Hearing footsteps approaching, Xueya quickly retracted his gaze, holding his breath, waiting for He Xulan's group to pass. But he heard a deep, pleasant male voice. "Your hat fell. Aren't you going to pick it up?" Xueya's back stiffened. After a moment's hesitation, he set down the red lacquered tray he was holding and crawled 2 steps toward the hat. Seeing the spotless embroidered shoes beside the hat, he held his breath again, stretched out his hand, and tried to grab the hat's brim. But his fingers were weak, and after 2 attempts, the hat slipped away again, even rolling a bit closer to the embroidered shoes. The shoes' owner took a step back just in time. Feeling embarrassed, Xueya's face flushed red. He silently crawled forward another step, using both hands to tightly grasp the disobedient hat this time. As soon as he retrieved the hat, the embroidered shoes began to move away. He Xulan and his group left. Hearing their footsteps fade away, Xueya let out a long sigh of relief. Then he was scolded by the leading palace servant for not greeting the Empress Dowager properly, losing his manners, and was punished with no dinner that night. Hearing he wouldn't get dinner, Xueya became utterly dejected. Since entering the palace, he hadn't had a proper meal. The servants at Fengrui Palace, where the new emperor resided, ostracized him. He could only eat after everyone else had finished, leaving behind unappetizing leftovers. This was why he wanted to serve Xuelingjing closely, to be seen by him. But now, even the leftovers were denied, and he would go hungry again. Knowing he would go hungry, Xueya felt disheartened while delivering items to the consorts' palaces. But upon reaching Consort Shu's palace, the smell of food made him suddenly lift his head. Consort Shu was talking to the leading palace servant, her charming eyes glancing over and pausing when she saw someone lift their head. Xueya didn't realize his small action was noticed. He stared at the freshly placed pastries, swallowing hard. However, he remembered where he was, reluctantly glanced at the pastries a few more times, and then lowered his head. The pastries must have just been made, their aroma was mouth-watering. But no matter how enticing, they had nothing to do with him. Returning to Fengrui Palace, as expected, he had no dinner. Rubbing his stomach, which was almost touching his back, Xueya thought that if he could rise in rank, he would make these people pay. Having no hope in Shupingnian, Xueya turned his attention to the chief eunuch beside Xuelingjing. This eunuch, around 40 years old, had a pale, beardless, round face. He smiled like a dog to Xuelingjing but was fierce like a wolf to the rest of them. Xueya secretly observed the chief eunuch, hoping to find any peculiar habits. However, to his disappointment, the chief eunuch seemed to have no such habits, not even drinking. Thus, Xueya continued doing menial tasks, either wiping tables, sweeping floors, or catching insects with a net. One day, he was sent to deliver something again. A young eunuch accompanied him, but halfway through, the young eunuch suddenly had a stomachache and said he needed to go to the restroom. Since they were delivering food, they couldn't delay. Seeing this, Xueya offered to go alone. This time, he was delivering to Consort Shu's palace. Xueya had an excellent memory for directions. After visiting a place once, he could remember how to get there the second time. These past few days had been oppressively hot, and the late afternoon sun was still scorching. By the time Xueya reached Consort Shu's palace, his cheeks were slightly sunburned. Consort Shu was trimming flower branches. Seeing someone delivering items, she casually said, "Just leave it there." "Yes." Xueya carefully stepped forward and placed the food box down. As he was about to leave, he was called back. "Wait, what did you bring?" Consort Shu put down her flower shears and fixed her gaze on Xueya's lowered face. Xueya replied, "It's hibiscus sesame cakes. His Majesty said they tasted good and wanted the whole palace to try them." Hearing this, Xueya couldn't help but think that Xuelingjing really respected He Xulan, the Empress Dowager. For the other consorts, he sent servants, but he personally delivered items to He Xulan. Consort Shu stood up and slowly walked to the table. She glanced at Xueya. "Help me open it." Xueya complied and opened the food box. As soon as it was opened, the aroma wafted out. He gripped the red lacquered lid tightly but quickly set it down and stepped back 2 paces, knowing it wasn't for him to eat. "What should I do? I'm quite full right now and can't eat this." Consort Shu sighed, her eyes drifting to Xueya and then to the palace maids before settling back on Xueya. What's your name? Servant Xueya, Xueya replied. Consort Xu hummed, I'm too full to eat. How about I bestow it to you? Xueya was stunned. He glanced at the pastries in the box, then quickly looked at Consort Xu. Having been in the palace for a short time, he often forgot proper etiquette. After one look, he lowered his eyes and shook his head. This servant doesn't dare. Are you afraid His Majesty will punish you? Don't worry. In my palace, if I don't let them speak out, they wouldn't dare. Besides, it's just a plate of pastries. Why be so anxious? Eat. Seeing Xueya still unmoving, Consort Xu's voice deepened. What? Are you waiting for me to give you chopsticks? Xueya hesitated, but Consort Xu turned away and continued trimming the flower branches by the window, seemingly having forgotten about Xueya's presence. When he returned to Fengrui Palace, it was already dark. As soon as Xueya arrived, someone told him, today's food is all gone. The person didn't leave after speaking, seemingly waiting for Xueya to show his usual disappointed reaction to missing a meal. But Xueya just replied, oh. The person frowned, about to say more, when a eunuch hurried over. Xueya, His Majesty summons you. Hearing this, Xueya's face lit up with joy. Really, he wanted to say he needed to freshen up but remembered he was half a eunuch, only having eunuch clothes, and his face fell again. These shabby clothes couldn't look good no matter what. Feeling disdainful, he followed the eunuch to Kui Lingjing's bedchamber, asking along the way, why does His Majesty want to see me? Who knows? You'll find out when you get there. The eunuch didn't say much more. When they arrived, he stopped at the door. Go in. His Majesty is inside. Looking at the illuminated palace, Xueya's initial joy diminished. He recalled Kui Lingjing's unpredictable temper. He desired wealth but also valued his life. Thinking this, his steps faltered. The eunuch beside him urged impatiently, do you want to keep His Majesty waiting? Go in. Xueya glanced at the palace servants. When their eyes met his, they quickly lowered their heads. He felt like he was being sent in to appease Kui Lingjing's anger. In other words, he was walking to his death. With this thought, Xueya took a deep breath and walked inside. Disobeying an imperial order meant death. Going in might not result in death, so he decided to take the gamble. The hall was brightly lit, the fragrance from the incense burner winding like threads. After court, Kui Lingjing changed into comfortable casual robes. At 16, his face still had a boyish look. One might mistake him for a wealthy young master rather than a king. Hearing the noise, Kui Lingjing slowly looked up. His almond-shaped eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing the kneeling figure. Your servant greets His Majesty. Long live the Emperor, Xueya said, trying to remain calm. Kui Lingjing lounged leisurely on his chair. Come here. Without hesitation, Xueya crawled forward until he saw Kui Lingjing's boots and stopped. As soon as he halted, a hand grabbed his chin, forcing him to look up. Meeting Kui Lingjing's shadowed eyes, Xueya's body trembled slightly. But he knew this was an opportunity. Who knew when he would get another chance to speak with Kui Lingjing? If he missed this chance, he would forever be bullied by the palace servants. Therefore, he suppressed his fear and put on a smile that he had practiced for a long time in the training yard. But just as he smiled, the hand under his chin suddenly increased its grip. Kui Lingjing's tone was harsh, no smiling allowed. Instantly, Xueya wiped away his smile completely. Xueya didn't understand why some people didn't like seeing others smile. Perhaps Kui Lingjing was a weirdo. This realization added a bit more sympathy toward Kui Lingjing when he was scared. Even if he had a noble birth, his mind wasn't normal. Kui Lingjing had no idea that Xueya, who was born into slavery, had developed sympathy for him. His gaze slowly swept across Xueya's face, and as he subtly tightened his grip on Xueya's chin, he noticed Xueya flinch in pain. Xueya's brows furrowed slightly, and he looked at Kui with a pleading expression. Seeing this, the corners of Kui's lips involuntarily lifted, and he eased his grip considerably. He suddenly understood why his godfather kept such a little plaything around. Are you hungry? Kui Lingjing withdrew his hand and reclined lazily in his chair. The shadow in his eyes dissipated like sunlight. Xueya hesitated for a moment, then nodded slightly. Kui Lingjing glanced at the desk beside him where a food box lay, much more exquisite than the one sent to Consort Xu. It's yours as a reward. Take it and eat. Xueya thanked him and got up to take the food box away but was stopped again. Eat it here. Kui Lingjing changed his mind for some reason. He rested his head on one hand, his gaze penetrating Xueya. Xueya hesitated briefly, then proceeded to open the food box. As he opened it, he realized there was more food inside than he had imagined, and it truly looked and smelled delicious. His appetite, which wasn't very hungry to begin with, was suddenly stimulated. Xueya hadn't expected to enjoy two good meals today. He couldn't help but smile, but remembering that Kui Lingjing didn't like to see people smile, he quickly suppressed his smile again. He picked up the chopsticks from the food box and started eating, enjoying the meal so much that he forgot who was sitting next to him. After he finished eating, he glanced nervously at Xueya. Xueya shifted position, and his index finger gestured. Seeing his movement, Xueya cautiously approached. Just as he leaned in, his cheek was suddenly gripped firmly by 2 fingers. He dared not frown or smile, just stared anxiously at Xueya. You, this broken bunny, eat quite a lot. Xueya's tone was mocking, and he didn't hold back with his hand either, squeezing Xueya's cheek until it felt like it was burning. He squeezed until Xueya no longer had the contentment of a full stomach, then finally released his grip satisfied. Once his hand let go, Xueya looked at Xueya's face, initially surprised, then burst into laughter. Feeling the pain on his cheek, Xueya didn't dare touch it. He followed Xueya's instruction to leave in a hurry, covering his face all the way back to his room. When he saw the clearly reddened and bruised imprint on his face in the mirror, he almost cried out of anger. Xueya was most proud of his face. He thought that apart from He Xulan, who was better looking than him, he was the best looking person in the world. Now, with 2 fingers from Xueya ruining his appearance, he was angry and upset, but could only curse Xueya silently. DMN Xueya. If that guy weren't the emperor, he wouldn't bother with that dog. Because of the imprint on his face, Xueya behaved for a few days, avoiding going near Xueya. However, Xueya began acting unusually. On the day when the imprint on his face was fading, Xueya suddenly called him over. Not to serve him personally, but to get his face pinched again. The imprint on Xueya's face deepened again, and that night he was so angry that he used his pillow to vent his frustration as if beating Xueya. By the 3rd time he was called to get his face pinched again in the same spot, Xueya finally couldn't bear it and cried in grievance. Xueya was pinching quite hard when suddenly tears dropped onto his hand, which startled him. He looked up and saw that the little rabbit was crying. Why are you crying? Xueya sounded somewhat disgusted. He used the hand that wiped away the tears and wiped it on Xueya's clothes. After doing so, he seemed to think it wasn't right, so he withdrew his hand, picked up a handkerchief from the side, and carefully wiped his hand clean. Xueya didn't care that he was in front of Xueya. He covered his face and muttered, "It's going to ruin my face." At this point, sorrow overwhelmed him, and tears fell even more. Having lived for 16 years, Xueya had never seen a man so concerned about his appearance. He chuckled lightly, thinking this broken bunny was really something. He picked up the handkerchief that had just wiped his hand and slapped Xueya's face with it, instructing, "No crying." At Xueya's words, Xueya could only force himself to stop crying. He clumsily wiped away the tears from his face, gradually regaining his composure. Xueya stared at Xueya for a moment, then suddenly called the chief eunuch outside, "Bring him some jade condensing ointment." The chief eunuch looked slightly surprised but quickly fetched the ointment for Xueya. Looking at the jade condensing ointment in his hand, Xueya hadn't yet thanked him when Xueya impatiently said, "Use this to wipe your face. It won't ruin your appearance. Now scram." Xueya obediently left, applying the ointment that night while continuing to curse Xueya silently. He wasn't grateful. After all, the injury on his face was caused by that D*MN Xueya. The jade condensing ointment was a good thing. The next day, the imprint on his face had faded considerably. Today, he was again ordered to deliver something. When he arrived at Consort Xu's palace, the palace maids informed him that Consort Xu was still resting and suggested they wait in the side chamber with tea. One of the eunuchs who had come with Xueya said, "No need to trouble yourselves. We'll just leave the items here. The consort says it's hard for you gongongs to come all this way to deliver things, especially in this hot autumn weather. Have some tea and rest a bit before leaving," the palace maid said, and the accompanying eunuchs were tempted. It was more comfortable to stay here and rest than to return to work. Xueya was happy to take a break. Not long after, a palace maid came to inform them that Consort Xu had awakened, but feeling a bit stuffy, she only wanted one person to come in and deliver the items. This task fell to Xueya, while the eunuchs who stayed in the side chamber received some snacks and a piece of silver. Xueya, holding the embroidered box in his hands, walked steadily towards the side hall. He had become more familiar with the proper etiquette these days. As soon as he knelt down to pay his respects, a pair of hands supported his arms. "Get up quickly." Xueya hesitated for a moment, then rose with the help of the other person's strength. Consort Xu's clothes today carried a strong fragrance, a bit overwhelming up close. After introducing what was inside the embroidered box, Xueya suddenly heard Consort Xu say to the palace maid outside, "Is the food ready? Bring it in." Consort Xu's beautiful eyes then turned to Xueya's face. "Stay here today and have your meal with me before you leave," she suddenly exclaimed, "What's wrong with your face?" As she spoke, she reached out to touch it. Xueya flinched and felt a bit panicked. "It's nothing." Consort Xu's expression darkened slightly, but she quickly smiled again. Why are you afraid? I just feel that we're destined to meet. You remind me of my younger brother from my natal family. Consort Xu had been selected in the last round of the emperor's concubine selection and entered the palace at the age of 16. Now as a consort, she was only 20 years old, at the peak of her beauty. However, being confined in the deep palace day after day, seeing the same scenery and people repeatedly, had become monotonous for her. After saying this, Consort Xu saw that Xueya remained silent and smiled gently. If you don't give me face, do you want me to personally go find the emperor? The emperor respects us, the former concubines. Every once in a while he sends someone to deliver things. Xueya hesitated for a moment before murmuring, this servant thanks Consort Xu. Just then, the freshly prepared meal was brought in. That night, Xueya couldn't sleep. Growing up in the eunuch academy, he understood some things. Besides male clients, there were also female clients. The Red Moon House had specially designated attendants for female clients, but Xueya was not one of them. The next day, Xueya couldn't muster any energy, feeling exhausted and weary. As a result, he was caught napping and punished, forbidden from having meals at noon and evening. Hungry again, Xueya stood by the wall, eventually thinking of Consort Xu. Is it really that delicious? Look, your mouth is covered in it. Consort Xu chuckled lightly, holding a heavily scented handkerchief as she leaned in to help Xueya wipe his lips. After she finished, she continued to watch Xueya eat, waiting until he had finished before eagerly pulling him up. Come over and see the painting I made. Consort Xu had deliberately not applied heavy makeup today, appearing almost without embellishment. She was naturally beautiful, and without the glamorous attire, she looked like an unmarried girl. She held onto Xueya's hand, leading him to a window seat where a small table with a painting awaited. How do you like my painting? Consort Xu had painted a butterfly fluttering over flowers. The butterfly in the painting looked lifelike. Although Xueya didn't understand much about art, he genuinely praised, it looks like a real butterfly. Hearing those words, her dimples appeared as she smiled. Then today, I'll paint one for you. I'll paint you. She gently pressed him back onto the couch and started preparing a clean sheet of paper. As she was painting a portrait, Consort Xu needed to look up at Xueya frequently. After staring at him for a while, Xueya suddenly realized that Consort Xu had sat down next to him. Before he could react, Consort Xu leaned against him, her tone filled with sadness. Xueya, if only I weren't a consort. If I were just an ordinary widow, I could openly keep you in my private residence. By then, I could play the zither while you listen, and I could paint while you watch. Wouldn't that be delightful? When Xueya was young, he had also fantasized about marriage. However, as he grew older, he knew that it was wishful thinking. But now, hearing Consort Xu's words, he inexplicably felt angry. Why is it that when he encountered women, even they wanted to keep him in their private quarters? But he couldn't argue against it. He was indeed being kept by her now. He couldn't eat in Fengrui Palace, but here he could enjoy delicacies. In addition, Consort Xu privately gave him money, saying that if anyone treated him badly, he could use the money to bribe them. Consort Xu sighed, looking deeply into Xueya's face. This was the first time she had leaned against Xueya, and the second time she had leaned against a man's chest. When she entered the palace, the late emperor was already seriously ill, with the scent of medicine lingering on him year-round, which made her nauseous, but Xueya was different, clean and refreshing, making people unable to help but approach. She stared fixedly and couldn't help reaching out to touch the man's face in front of her. His face was really handsome. Her fingertips just touched it, and suddenly, the palace door was kicked open heavily. Consort Xu turned in surprise, just about to stand up, but it was too late. He Xulan strode into the inner hall, seeing Consort Xu who had just panically stood up and Xueya still sitting on the couch. His face suddenly darkened. Your Majesty, I just, Consort Xu stuttered, unable to speak further, but the men behind He Xulan swiftly moved forward, binding both her and Xueya, quickly gagging them. He Xulan's face darkened. Consort Xu, in recognition of the late emperor's grace, has voluntarily chosen to reside in Qingyan convent for purification, often accompanying the Buddha for blessings to the Li dynasty. Consort Xu's pupils contracted tightly. She tried to say something, but all that came out were muffled sounds. Disgust filled He Xulan's eyes. Seeing that he wouldn't even glance more, palace attendants swiftly dragged Consort Xu away, while all her trusted aides were immediately executed. Xueya knelt on the ground, hearing the successive screams outside, his face drained of color, not daring to move. When he caught sight of the black boots embroidered with cloud patterns and golden dragons, his body uncontrollably trembled. A hand forcefully gripped his cheek, forcing him to lift his head. He Xulan looked at Xueya, trembling in fear, and sneered, that foolish woman is indiscriminate, even taking a liking to someone like you. He raised his gaze momentarily, then suddenly noticed something on Consort Xu's dressing table. With a scoff, He Xulan grabbed Xueya's collar and dragged him to the dressing table. Xueya's hat had long fallen off, leaving his hair disheveled and his clothes in disarray. Are you even worthy of liking women? He Xulan sneered into the mirror at Xueya, who was sweating and pale. Let's see after today if any woman will still like you. Come, bring that foolish woman's clothes over and dress him in them.